We have really reached the stretch run of the season. There are 3 weeks left. Will the New York Mets make the playoffs? I'll discuss that and more on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, the New York Mets could not get their winning streak to 10 games. They lost on Sunday to the Cincinnati Reds. Well, they did win the series, but that snapped the winning streak at 9 games. Thanks to that winning streak, though, the Mets are in a playoff spot with 3 weeks left to go. They are tied with the Atlanta Braves. They lost a game to the Braves on Sunday as the Braves completed their series victory over the Blue Jays. They lost again to the Diamondbacks, who finally got a win against the Astros after dropping the first 2 games. Meanwhile, the Padres lost as well, losing their series against the Giants. So now you have 4 teams in this wildcard race that are separated by just 2 games. The Padres atop the heap, the Diamondbacks a half game back, and a game and a half ahead of the Braves and the Mets, who are really neck and neck here down the stretch. It's going to be a thrilling finish. It is unfortunate that the winning streak was snapped in a game that felt pretty winnable, but ultimately the Mets just could not get the bats going, and that really doomed them in this one. Luis Severino pitched a gem. He did everything he could to keep the Mets in this game. Really didn't even have any issues until the 5th inning, where he had an amazing escape act, where he gives up a leadoff double and a very cheap one, basically infield double, which sounds crazy, but you have to see the play. Line drive, if you can call it that came out the bat at 47 miles per hour, but hit Mark Vientos' way. Vientos was shifted heavily, towards second base. So he tries to make a diving catch on it. Ball bounces away from him. And I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been Jake Fraley. He ends up on second base. Santiago Espinal then hits a blue pit pop up that only advanced the runner to third, but all of a sudden 2 cheap hits have runners at first and third with nobody out against Luis Severino. And he did an amazing job to get out of that jam. First thing he did was he picked off Espinal at first base. So he got 1 out there, and he struck out the next 2 batters to get out of that inning unscathed. And at that point, I really thought, all right, the way Sevy's dealing, the Mets are going to win this game. Bottom of the 6th inning, they got a run. Pete Alonso drew a walk. Jose Iglesias, an infield hit. Starling Marte, a base hit that drove in Pete. But that was it for the offense the whole game. And that's ultimately the reason why they lose here. Although I know fans were upset with how the bullpen was managed the last 2 games. Because you get into a situation here where Phil Maton comes on in a tie game in the 9th inning, and he's the one that gives up runs. And Edwin Diaz was not available because he pitched in a 4-0 game the day before. But before we get to that, how did the game get tied? Well, Luis Severino did give up a run, a couple of base hits, in a wild pitch, actually, that doom him. Reed Garrett comes on, strands a runner with a big strikeout, then pitches a scoreless 8th inning with 2 strikeouts. So he looks sensational right now. All of a sudden, we're looking at the Reed Garrett from the beginning of this season, which is a huge development for this team down the stretch. But Maton comes on in that 9th, hits the first batter that he faces. Then Ty France gets an infield hit. Jake Fraley grounds out to Pete Alonso, but that advances both of the runners. And Santiago Espinal ends up getting the hit that dooms the Mets, a double that scores 2, that ultimately proves to be the ball game. Now, again, Edwin Diaz was not available, and I understand that there's some frustration in the fan base because of that. I've seen some tweets on social media. I think I even saw some comments in some of our YouTube episodes, or maybe I got some text from the insiders. Regardless, there was that sentiment. Why was Edwin Diaz wasted on Saturday in a 4-0 game? I tried to explain it on yesterday's show, and when I did acknowledge what was deemed a mistake by some, I said, look, on Saturday, pitching Edwin Diaz, I would not have done it. I did not agree with Carlos Mendoza's decision there, but at the same time, my defense of the move is that the Mets wanted to make sure they got that win. And guess what? By having Edwin Diaz pitch on Saturday, they won that game. They won the series. I also said that Edwin Diaz has been pitching a lot better because he's been used more frequently. So if using him in some of these other situations is going to keep him sharp for these final 3 weeks, that's the most important thing. So I like using Edwin as much as you can. Some of these stretches this season where we haven't seen Edwin for a week, that can't happen in these final 3 weeks. You got to pitch him. And if you burn him today, or if you burn him tomorrow to save today, well, at least you get the win, right? So in that sense, I'm okay with it. Phil Maton, you want him to pitch on Saturday? Why are we envisioning that he has a clean inning on Saturday when he didn't on Sunday? Because if the exact same thing happens that happened today, he hits the leadoff man, gives up a couple hits, gives up a run. If that happens again, but it's a day earlier, well, guess what? Edwin Diaz was burned anyway, pitching in a more high-stakes game where maybe it's 4-2 with a runner on second base. And maybe in that situation, after getting up and getting hot prior to the ninth inning, sitting down, cooling off, and then all of a sudden having to get hot again, maybe Edwin Diaz blows it. And then maybe you lose this series. So while I understand the frustration and how this game went, because we're used to the Mets winning every day. They've done it 9 games in a row prior to this, and this wasn't a winnable game. It's not a great team. They only score 3 runs. It's frustrating. And it was tied up, top of the ninth. You get through that. You're envisioning some walk-off magic, if not in the bottom of the ninth, at least in extra innings. And it doesn't happen. So I understand why it can be frustrating, but you're going to hurt your own psyche trying to play Monday morning quarterback on these things, because ultimately you look at this weekend as a whole, nobody gained ground this wild card race against the Mets here. None of them. Yes. On Sunday, sure. The Braves got a game back. But it was a game the Mets took on Saturday, right? So that evens things out. There wasn't a team in this wild card race that swept the weekend. And in fact, the Mets gained ground on the Padres and the Diamondbacks. So it was a good weekend overall. Frustrating finish, but it ultimately is what it is. And look, Severino, can't blame him for this one. He goes 6 2/3, gives up 1 run on the 5 hits and 2 walks, got 8 strikeouts. His stuff looked good. I'm very confident in Severino taking the ball his next time out in Philadelphia. I think he's going to rise to that moment. So feel good about that. When you look at the lineup, there is some cause for concern, and we'll talk about that a little bit on the final segment when I get into the series preview. Francisco Lindor getting a little bit cold this series. Some of his at-bats weren't great, so we'll see how quickly he can snap out of that, because for one, if Lindor's not playing well, we know what's going to happen to this team. And two, that MVP case that I've been trying to make, well, if he stumbles here in the finish, no chance. The only way he's going to win that MVP is if he has an incredible final 3 weeks that so far outshines Shohei Ohtani, who I believe is now at 46 home runs and 46 stolen bases. So Lindor's got to pick it up. He just lost his on-base streak, but now start a new one. 3 weeks left in the season. Brandon Nimmo, maybe some signs of him snapping out of it. He had a couple foul ball home runs, and Carlos Mendoza said it after the game. They got to extend those foul poles. If the Mets don't make the playoffs, and even if they do, I think Steve Cohen, watching his team potentially lose a game because a 2-run homer gets erased because the foul poles aren't long enough, you got to fix that. So that's frustrating that home run or would-be home run ends up coming back. We don't know if a foul pole would have made a difference, but there's just no way that the replay review team could have done anything about it. You just can't tell with the foul pole being as short as it is. So we'll see, though. Maybe Nimmo has a hot streak left in him. That would be huge. Pete Alonso, his last 13 games, 21 strikeouts and 49 at-bats. That's got to change. Mark Vientos, the one real hot hitter on this team, batting .349 over the last couple weeks with an OPS over 1,000. He can't do it himself. It's going to take your best 3 players, which is still Lindor, Nimmo, and Alonso. Those guys got to step up. Obviously, this year, Vientos has been the second best hitter on this team, or you can make an argument based on some rate stats like OPS, the best hitter. It's going to take your guys, the guys that this team is built in the image of, Lindor, Nimmo, and Alonso, for the Mets to cross this finish line as a playoff team. But obviously getting the contributions from Vientos, JD Martinez, Jesse Winker, all these other guys, that's only going to help. But where are the Mets right now with 3 weeks left? What I want to do here in the next segment is talk about the wild card race. I'm going to break down everything for all 4 of these teams, who is going to be there when it's all said and done. We'll go through that a little bit in the next segment. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We have something a little bit different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon at a market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Again, this is for all FanDuel customers where you can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV now through September 22nd. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. We talk a lot on this show about the fact that Francisco Lindor called a meeting for the New York Mets after that disastrous series to the Dodgers prior to a series against the Diamondbacks at the end of May, where the team was way out of the race and they looked dead in the water. Since that point to now, over almost 90 games, the New York Mets have gone 56-33. They have played 23 games over 500 in a span that is larger than 3 months. It has been a remarkable journey for this team. And as we get to this final 3 weeks, we should appreciate what the Mets did to get to this point. They have been the best team in baseball since that meeting by record. That's insane. If you were to go back then and tell any of us, here's what's going to happen over the next 90 games, nobody would believe you. Nobody. That team did not look like they had a shot at the end of May. And here we are. The Mets took us all the way to the football season. Week 1 kicked off yesterday, or today as I'm recording, but yesterday as you're listening. All the NFL games are playing, and there was definitely not any expectation that the Mets would be playing relevant baseball by this point in the season. But here they are. And across this long stretch, they've played 27 series. They've won 17 of them. They've split 7, and they've only lost 4. So now you look at 6 series left. What do the Mets have to do to get the job done? On yesterday's show, I went back to a podcast I recorded on August 27th going into this most recent series against the Diamondbacks, where I was breaking down the math that it would take for the Mets to get to 90 wins and how the other teams in this NL wildcard race were going to get to 90, so the Mets had to get at least there if they wanted a playoff spot. And at the time that I recorded that original episode on August 27th, the Mets needed to go 22-9 to get to 90 wins. Now, after this winning streak, and that was the whole point of the show, that the Mets needed to get a winning streak at some point. Well, guess what? They just got one. They reeled off 9 straight. Well, now the math has changed again. All they got to do is go 12-7 down the stretch here. That's it. 12-7 down the stretch, final 19 games. They're in. There's 3 weeks left. The way you look at it, you got to win 4 games a week. You win 4 games a week, you're in. Another way to look at it, there's 6 series left. Take 2 games in every single series. Boom, you're in. So this team is right there. I know we've talked about the schedule, but it's worth mentioning here as we really get into it. Final 19 games. 3 weeks. You got a homestand that is sandwiched between a road trip this week and then the final road trip of the season. Can this team pull it off? This week, you got the Blue Jays first, off day on Thursday, Philadelphia next. Not going to be an easy week. I'll preview the Blue Jays series in the next segment, but even though they're a sub-500 team, they're a better team than the Reds, for sure. And lately, they've even been playing better baseball than the Red Sox. So you can make an argument this is the best team that the Mets have faced since that Diamondback series at the beginning of this winning streak. So we'll see how they fare. They got to make sure they win this series, first and foremost. Then you got the Phillies. Then the following week, you got a homestand, 3 against the Nationals. That's a team that you want to beat up on because if you stack an extra win there, one less one you got to get against the Phillies, for example. Then it's a 4-game set against the Phillies at home that very well could decide the Mets season because if they have a horrible showing in that series, good luck being in the race still for that final week. Now, the good thing is the Mets have that series against the Braves. But that's a double-edged sword, right? Because the entire season could come down to that series. But before then, you want to be in a really good spot. If you go into that series and you already have a 2-game lead, all right, you're in a good spot. So this is a stretch of the season where obviously every game matters. You want to win every single day. And the Mets have it right there in front of them. String together 3 more good weeks. They've done it now for over 3 months. They're right there. You look at the other teams in this race, though, I don't think it's just Mets Braves. Because the Braves have a pretty easy schedule. All right? This week, they got a game against the Reds at home, a makeup game, and then fly to DC for 2 games, have an off day, come back home, play 4 games against the Dodgers. So that's going to be a tough one, Friday through Monday. They have their final road trip of the season after that. They go to Cincinnati, then to Miami, and then there's the Mets showdown, and then they have the Royals to close out their season. But outside of that Dodgers series, they can keep doing what they've been doing to keep their head above water, which is beating bad teams. On the other hand, you look at the 2 teams from the West that are in this race. The Padres just lost the series to the Giants, and they will play them again. So here's their next week. They got a day off on Monday. They play 2 against the Mariners. Then they have a series in San Francisco. The Mariners have been playing a little bit better lately, so we'll see how the Padres make it through this stretch. The following week, they had the Astros and the White Sox, pair of 3-game series, their final week of the season. 1 more series against the Dodgers, and then the Diamondbacks. So it's not an easy road for the Padres by any stretch. You look at strength of schedule, it's going to say, oh, the Mariners not the best team, the Giants, the White Sox, their schedule's not that hard. Those are all kind of, well, not the White Sox, but the Mariners and the Giants this week, I don't think those teams are going to be a cakewalk. Astros are certainly going to be tough. And then that final week for them, Dodgers and Diamondbacks, that's going to be really tough. So the Padres, even though they have a 2-game lead, could they fall back? Certainly a possibility. The Diamondbacks have an off day on Monday and an off day on Thursday this week. 2 games in the middle against the Rangers at home. Then the Brewers come to town for 3. They then take a road trip where they go to Colorado for 3, Milwaukee for 4. Then their final week of the season, it's at home, Giants, Padres. If the New York Mets enter that final series of the season, and they are, let's just say, even with the Padres and Diamondbacks, how about all 4 teams go into that final weekend and everyone's just knotted up? The Braves and the Mets will have a huge advantage because those 2 teams are going to go head-to-head. So if one of them steamrolls the other one, whoever got steamrolled is going to be out, as long as the Mets and the Braves do what they have to do in their final series, and they're not playing bad teams either. This is going to be an awesome finish to the season. Unfortunately, it's going to go one of 2 ways. Either we're all going to be over the moon because the New York Mets have made the playoffs, or we're going to be disappointed. But you know what? I am happy that we've had this run. I'll tell you what, I've done this show since 2019. So this is technically my 6th season, if I'm not mistaken, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Yeah, my 6th season covering this team. And I'm now over 5 years in. Maybe I'm being prisoner of the moment, but I think this is the most fun I've had doing the show. I really do. 19, it was the first year, and that was a fun team, especially in the second half. That really got me into this whole thing. 2020 was a whole other thing, just challenging me to be able to do a show. 2021 was a disappointing year. 2022 was sort of easy, right? It was just, oh, the Mets are amazing. But it wasn't the journey that this year's been. The ups and the downs, it's made the highs so much sweeter. And I really hope this team gets into October because it'll be a testament to a group that came together as a unit in a way that I don't think we've seen a Mets team come together this way in a long time. Probably not since that team that went to the World Series in 2015. It's been a special season. And we got 3 weeks left at least. So let's enjoy them and see how it all shakes out. But we still got one more segment today. I know it sounds like I'm wrapping things up. I got one more segment for you because we got to preview Mets versus Blue Jays. So I'll do that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. So it brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways and get the lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know there's no starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Now, over the last couple of weeks, the Mets have been on a winning streak, right? So what I wanted to do before we talk about the Blue Jays is look at the Mets the same way I do looking at whatever team the Mets are going to play going into a series, which is typically looking at the last 2 weeks. Who's hot, who's not, all that good stuff. Over the past 15 days, while the Mets have won 9 in a row during a large stretch of that time, they are middle of the pack in OPS and in runs scored. Now, what's kept them afloat is they've hit 17 home runs in 13 games, which is among the top 10 in baseball. But their offense has been more middle of the pack, and you lose Jeff McNeil, who was giving you good at-bats. So the lineup takes a hit. DJ Stewart was the name, or was the guy that came up on Sunday. I told you guys that was going to happen. We saw him have one at-bat in the game. He struck out, although probably could have walked, got a rough call regardless. Doesn't matter. We'll see Stewart in some selective pinch hit opportunities like that. No Acuna. No Drew Gilbert. I'm sorry for fans that wanted to see it. They're prioritizing developing those guys, and neither of them is tearing the cover off the ball to the point that you would call him up. Drew Gilbert has hit a lot of home runs in his last 15 games. Might be like 7 home runs, maybe the last 16, 17 actually. Regardless, though, that's all he's done. And he just needs to play. He hasn't had much of a season. Acuna hasn't hit in AAA. I mean, largely. So I get why the Mets went this route. Yes, Acuna brings speed and defense, but they got that with Pablo Reyes. They got that with Tyrone Taylor as far as the speed element. So this team is going to be carried or sunk by their everyday players. I mean, they pretty much are what they are at this point. You're going to see that same infield now. Alonso, Iglesias, Lindor, and Vientos. It's going to be either Alvarez or Trent's behind the dish, and those guys got to step it up. They haven't hit in a minute. And then the outfield, Brandon Nimmo's the one constant. If he's going to be that, he's got to start carrying his weight. He's got to hit more. He's had a bad season. By the stats, arguably the worst season of his career, which sounds sort of off when he's driven in 76 runs. But if you look at OPS, it's been pretty bad compared to his norms. OPS in his career over 800. This year, it's under 750. He's got to be better. Pete Alonso, you can make an argument it's been one of the worst seasons of his career. Now, it hasn't been a bad year for either of those guys, but they haven't met their past production, and they have 3 weeks here to get their team into the playoffs. And then there's Lindor has been carrying the team all season, but he's got to finish this thing strong. We already talked about that a little bit here. And then hopefully, again, you get the contributions from the Winkers, the JD Martinez, the Starling Martes. Harrison Bader all of a sudden starting to swing it pretty well. So the offense has to be better. Now, why the Mets have gone on this run, their pitching has been exceptional over the last 2 weeks. Their 2.48 ERA is second best in baseball. Their 1.01 whip is also second best. Over the last 3 starts for Jose Quintana, he has only given up 1 run in 18 innings. It's ridiculous because it's 0.50 ERA. Minaya, 3.10 ERA, Severino, 2.95, David Peterson, 2.08. So their rotation has been largely good. They got Paul Blackburn back tonight. The bullpen, Reed Garrett, Danny Young, Ryan Stanek, Huascar Braziban, Alex Young, and Adam Ottavino. Those 6 guys over the past 2 weeks, none of them has given up a run. The only guys in the bullpen that have given up runs are the guys that are the high leverage guys. Edwin Diaz, Phil Maton, and Jose Budo, and you still trust those guys. So the bullpen all of a sudden has maybe found some solid footing. If that can continue for 3 more weeks, and we know how volatile bullpens are, but if that unit can hold strong, I really think this team is going to make it because I believe this lineup is going to step up. And I also trust this rotation. Now, when it comes to this series against the Blue Jays are a sub 500 team. They're 68-76, but they had a good August. They had a winning record in August for the first time all season. And over the last 30 days, the Blue Jays are second in baseball in home runs. They're top 10 in runs scored, and they're third in OPS. Spencer Horwitz had a monster series against the Braves. He has 7 home runs over the last 30 days with a 929 OPS. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has been scorching hot in the second half. He's got a 957 OPS over the last 30 days, hitting 327. Those 2 guys have really been carrying the team, but they've gotten steady home runs up and down the lineup, which is why they have had a good offense over the past month here. Their team ERA over the last 30 days is 3.33. So again, even though this is a bad team overall and the Braves did beat them this weekend, it's still a team that can be dangerous, particularly at home. For this series, the Blue Jays have not announced any of their pitchers, so we're going off of some fantasy website that I found to try to predict. I also went back and checked their last turn through. So I believe we're going to see Chris Bassett game 1 against Paul Blackburn. Bassett's got a 4.30 ERA in the season. We know him very well, don't we? Second game would be David Peterson versus Bowden Francis. And Bowden Francis has been on a tear lately. Over his last 7 games pitched, 6 of them starts. 1.56 ERA with 45 strikeouts and 40 1/3 innings pitched. 0.5 whip. That means in a 7 outing span, basically 7 starts. 6 starts officially, and then I think 1 game where it was bulk relief. But regardless, Bowden Francis has been giving up a base runner every 2 innings. Not easy to score when a guy's doing that. And the final game of the series would be Sean Manaea versus Kevin Gausman. Now, Gausman has not had a great season. He's got a 4.09 ERA, but you look at his last 7 starts, he's got a 3.12. So it's not easy pitching matchups either for the Mets that they're going up against here. This is just one of those series that the Mets had to find a way to win 2 games. And yes, you can say, oh yeah, we'll sweep them. They're a sub 500 team. They're a team that has underperformed largely this entire season, that now that the pressure's been off, they've become a fairly dangerous spoiler. So you got to be vigilant going into this series. This is not going to be just a cakewalk. Hopefully the Mets can get the job done, win this series, head to Philly. If you win both these series this week, that is a job well done, and that'll keep them very much in this race. But one bad week at this point in the season, that could kill you. So the Mets got to keep playing their best baseball, and it's going to be fun to watch. We'll see how they manage this final stretch here. I'm excited to watch these guys step up in this pennant race. It's been thrilling the last couple weeks with the winning streak, but just overall the last 3 months, and it'll be a real shame if they can't get across the finish line. So let's go Mets, guys. I'll be back every single day to cover whatever happens with these games. So check me out on tomorrow's show, breaking down the first game, Mets versus Blue Jays. If you are listening on the audio side, do me a favor, follow, rate, and review. We reached number 3 on the charts today as far as top baseball podcasts in the country. So appreciate that. We've been in the top 10 many times over the years, but I'm not sure if we've ever hit number 3, or at least that I've caught it. So appreciate all of you guys for making that happen, listening on all of your podcast apps. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. The goal is to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. We're over 9,500, so we're getting closer and closer. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day, not for your second watch. Head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything, the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.